Okay, our next presentation is around machines being able to see better than we can, or can they? So please welcome Kelsey and Sammy to the stage.
Thank you. So in 1969, my father was stationed in Saigon. And while he was there, one of the jobs that he did is he actually worked in a service club, which probably isn't bad duty in 1969. And he had an opportunity then to become friends with a lot of the Vietnamese who worked in the service club as well. And this is actually his friend Ton. And this is my father with his friend Na. And in 1970, he left Vietnam, and he actually lost touch with all of his friends, including his friend Whit here that we see. So for 46 years, he didn't have any contact with any of these friends during kind of a key time in his life. But last year, through some internet sleuthing and a bit of luck, he managed to reconnect with his friends. And then in December, I actually took my father to what is now Ho Chi Minh City, and we managed to meet these three women again. On the left is Ton, then Na, my father, and Whit. A few changes from 1969 to 2015, but a great time for them to reminisce. And my father brought these photos with for them to share and tell stories. And this is one of the things I love about the power of photography, the power of photos, is in telling stories, that friends after 46 years could share those stories, that I could share this story with you, and that we can share the stories of our consumers with our business partners through the power of photos. Part of what makes photos so powerful is that they're verifiable. That's why, and I'm probably not the only one in the room, when I go on vacation, I take photos of myself in front of famous things so I can come back and say, yes, I was really there. We see that all the time. If you go to any monuments, there's always everyone out front taking the photos, showing off. It's that proof that you were there. Photos can add that to our research when we're sharing with business partners. We're not just talking about it, it's not just numbers, it's not just a slide. There's a photo of what's really happening in their home. Photos also add a lot of rich context. So working for the Schwan Food Company, I care a lot about what's happening at dinner. Who are you having it with? What are you having? What kind of plates or bowls or dishes? Who else is around? Photos show all of that context all at one time. I think what's interesting, we're here at an innovation conference. I'm talking about photos. I have a lot of passion about photos. In some ways, there is nothing new about photos and research. If we think about observation, this photo does just that. I can see what kind of freezer they have. I can see what kind of food and brands they have in their freezer, how they store the food. Is it neat? Is it in disarray? What's it like? So again, nothing new about that. If we think about ethnography, if we think about photo diaries, nothing new about that in research. This one I like because I think about understanding over time what you're having for dinner every night. Not the beautiful photo you put on Facebook or Pinterest. This is the real meal they had, right? Photos help with those moments of truth at home, in store. And if we think about photos, it's really just we're getting to content analysis. Again, not a new technique. What's changed, obviously, is our ability for all of us to get photos. And so what this means is that we have so many more photos. You know, if you go back 15 years and you were doing this kind of project and you had to use an old camera and you had to get print film developed, so you get a few photos to go with just a lot more work today, so easy to get so many photos so quickly. And this is really natural behavior. I'm asking someone to do something they already do all the time. And they also share it all the time, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat or so many other places. Consumers are already sharing their photos. It's natural behavior in a way that this is not natural behavior. So the great thing is that this leads to all of these great, rich photos. But analyzing photos is also a challenge. It's a lot of work because there's all that richness, all of that depth. It's not as easy. Some of that quant work is pretty easy for me to get through that analysis compared to trying to make sense of all of this. So how do we kind of get help with that? This is actually one of my favorite photos from our trip to Vietnam. This is my father, and this is Whit's grandson, Kim. And the reason I share this is this kind of sums up my emotions right now about using photos in research. It's kind of old meeting new. If I look at my father and his face, there's kind of happiness and surprise. Things have really changed a lot, and they're continuing to change very rapidly. At the same time, how do we deal with these changes? How do we take advantage of the ability to analyze all of these photos? And that's where I kind of look at Kim. Bit of skepticism, not sure what the future brings, not sure what to think about it. As I think about how busy I am, how many things I have going on, I want to take advantage of these photos, but being able to do that, I mean, I probably need some help. I don't have more hours in the day, I wish I did, but how do we do that? So I'm going to turn it over to Sammy to give us some ideas of how we might deal with that.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. So indeed, visuals are important to the world of market research, as Kelsey mentioned. And I think her skepticism is well-founded to some degree as well. There is a lot of visual content out there. It's rich in insights. It's rich in data. And we do have the challenge of how do we analyze it? How do we analyze it effectively, efficiently, and as part of our presentation, how do we do it at scale, right? But I'll offer the counterpoint, which is that I'm for one, am very optimistic about the prospects of artificial intelligence, and in particular machine learning, and how we can sort of explore that area. So let's explore it. So this is a picture of my my 4-year-old when he was 6 months. And these are a bunch of pictures of my wife, his mother. So I think the key question to ask when you're talking about machine learning is, in essence, what is the foundation of learning for a machine? And we don't have to look very far because it's really just rooted in how the human brain works, essentially. So in this particular example, a human child by the age of 6 months has seen about 1 million images and has taken about 1 million mental snapshots of his mother. And as you can see, he's taken these snapshots in all sorts of forms. You know, the mom is maybe with makeup, without, with glasses, without, frontal views, side views, profile views, etc. And every time he processes an additional image, he's being reinforced verbally as well that these are images of your mother, or this is your mother. And there are other feelings and emotions that come along with that as well. But basically what that's doing is creating to get technical, a neural network, a trained neural network inside of a person's brain. And in fact, that's exactly the sort of the underpinning foundation of how machines learn as well. So you can see if you remember from your high school biology, there's decision points and neurons and synapses in your brain. And that's exactly what we're doing in computer science as well. We have a pretty simple neural net or artificial intelligence neural network depicted here, but they can get extremely complex. The last thing I'll mention about the foundations of neural networks and machine learning is that you've all heard this notion of deep learning, right? But what really is deep learning? How does a machine learn on a deep level? Well, our brains are deep learners as well. And what that means is subconsciously our brains can actually take inputs, parse them into subsegments, analyze those through a neural network individually, and then piece them together into a holistic analysis. And that's where sort of the new frontier of artificial intelligence is headed as well. So this is fancy science, but how does it relate to market research? Well, as Kelsey was mentioning, at the very basic level, we have to analyze for content, right? So content analysis is really important. And in fact, the jury is not out on this topic. Machines do really well at understanding the content within images. It's almost becoming a commodity, in fact. There are APIs from Google and Microsoft, and they do a highly accurate job of telling you, for example, that is a grapefruit. Those are garbanzo beans, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of the important first step. Traditionally, we used to hire analysts, or in fact, we do today. We hire analysts to go through filter and code and tag imagery. But the next frontier is really the exciting stuff, and that's really now that we have what the content of an image is, where do we go from there? We go to the emotions, or how humans actually can react to imagery, right? So, for example, in this particular picture, you can see there's a table, there's possibly a turkey, people, carrots, etc. But you and I, as humans, we can also make assumptions. They might be subjective associations or assumptions, but we can make these assumptions, like this is probably a Thanksgiving setting. We feel like this is a time of merriment or happiness. This assumption that this could be a family or rooted in traditions here. So this is sort of the next frontier, and I just want to give you 2 examples of how you might use this to analyze imagery. The first is complaint research. Imagine you're a customer service representative and somebody submits a photo to you like this. So you can understand emotions from a picture taker or submitter's perspective, and in this case, you might actually conclude, the machine actually might conclude that they felt, frustrated, disgusted, etc. And then finally, from the perspective of the picture viewer, so think of maybe a scenario where you're an advertiser, you created this campaign, and you want to understand how people are actually going to respond to this image. So it's not from a picture taker's perspective, but from a potential viewer's perspective. And in this case, it might be something like, beauty or delicious or something like that, right? So you get to more of the human level understanding of imagery. And this is my final slide because I like to end on a kind of a nice picture. But basically, I want to lean in and say that I'm very optimistic about this space. It's a very exciting space. It's really bringing the human side of us to machines. And I do think it's possible because the foundational learnings of machines are based on the human brain. So I'm very interested in this topic. If anyone wants to grab me in the hallway and chat about it, I'm happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Some questions around whether machines can see better than humans.
You see the audience. Actually, better from over here.
Okay.
See one at the back there.
Thanks for the presentation. You talk obviously about the intelligence of the computers. Have you found there where they struggle in any particular imagery sets?
They do, but again, they struggle in the same ways humans do, I would say. So it really depends on your training data. If you were to give humans, 100 images of M&Ms and called them, Skittles, then they would probably think the 101st image is also of Skittles if it was of M&Ms. So it's really about the training data. It's actually a science around artificial intelligence called supervised learning. So you have to actually teach these machines in a supervised manner so that they are fed accurate data and accurate sort of coding and categorization. It's a good question, though.
Any other questions? I have one which somebody mentioned in one of the other tracks around getting people's consent when doing visual analysis at scale. What's your sort of overall thoughts around that?
Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think the consent depends on what you're using it for. Analysis can be a little more open. Obviously, if any of us can go look on Pinterest and analyze what's sitting out on Pinterest. So if it's for analysis purposes, I think it's more the reproduction or using them in presentations that can be more of a challenge. I think that's where it can be important that you're working with, from a client side, are you working with a supplier who has permission from respondents in their photos so that you can use those photos? And obviously, then again, there's still levels, right, to anything with permissions. Using a photo internally only within your business is different than Sammy showing something here to what's technically a public audience that's going to be posted online. Those are very different scenarios.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that there's the rights from a legal perspective, there's the rights from sort of a reputational perspective, and then there's the rights from the ethical perspective. So I think the legal rights are, you can have people submit photos and have them sort of do a checkbox that says you're handing away the rights to this imagery, and I think that's the easy thing to do. But then further down the road where you've got the ethical rights and stuff like that, do you really want to share somebody's child, for example, as part of your brand? So those are things as a brand you have to decide, basically.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. So is the basic assumption then that computers can or will be able to see better than humans? And if that is better, is it because they can do it faster, or is it that you think they'll be able to actually see things or infer things that humans are not able to do naturally?
Yeah, so I'll give my answer to that question, which is in the present day, I would say that just given where we are and with human understanding of imagery and how our human brains work, we're not quite there. In the near future, I think we're going to be on par. And then I think in the not distant, but in the future, we're going to be outdone, unfortunately or fortunately, by the machines. And on two fronts. One is, yes, on speed, but also on breadth of categories. So, you give somebody that picture of Thanksgiving who lives in, India, for example, and they would not know that's Thanksgiving because they haven't culturally been trained to understand that tradition. So a computer can have the breadth of sort of experiences of all cultures, basically.
I think I'm probably a little more skeptical than Sammy, and that's why he was laughing, because we've had this conversation, and he's definitely more optimistic than I am. I definitely think on content. I think, though, it does back to what Sammy talked about in terms of that training. And I think that could be the tricky part, because if I think about working for a business, and even if I go to a full-service supplier and you have the best quant people in the world and you send me back this great report, you still don't know all the nuances of my business, and you're still a bit off base because you can't quite get it to the full insights I need because you don't understand my business the deep way that I do. So I would still kind of question for me how far the machine can take without knowing some of the context, right? A great report that's really impactful in my company also means I understand the politics of my company. I understand who's more influential. I understand a lot of nuances that I don't know if machines can quite get there. I do believe they'll get us further than where they can today.
Great, thank you very much.